David K. Johnston, I was thinking about you in relation to all the focus that has now been centering around Donald Trump's finances. You've written chapter and verse literally in your books about Donald Trump, the smokescreen, the realities, his complete, the image essentially that he's curated so effectively with help from the media as to his sort of billionaire status and his status of insane wealth. Now that we're looking into his finances and a couple of these legal judgments, you write in dcreport.org that we're really going to see some of the limitations to Donald Trump's financial realities. Can you speak to that?
Sure. Well, E. Jean Carroll has now grabbed him by the wallet, and we're going to see if he can perform. Donald had a $5 million judgment against him for defaming E. Jean Carroll because a judge found that she had been raped under New York law. And when he denied that and called her a liar and a whack job, a jury held that he defamed her and he owed $5 million. And Donald is such a genius that he's now turned that into a loss of that he's going to eventually have to pay of $88 million more. I mean, this is just stunning that one can be that incompetent at what they're doing. So,
and when you say that, you're talking about because of his defamatory remarks, which he just can't stop
he kept
making.
Doubling and tripling and quintupling down and denouncing her again and again. And He shows up in the courtroom and he walks out as the judge put on the record. So, I mean, there's a meme going around the internet that if Alina Habari is your lawyer, she'll downgrade your drunk driving arrest into first-degree murder.
She does seem, manifestly incompetent. But anyway, to your point,
so the issue here is that now Donald, he's going to eventually have to pay this, but he says he's going to appeal. Well, to appeal a federal court decision, you either have to post the $88 million with the court, as Trump did with the $5 million, where he put up the money, or he has to get a bond for 20% of the amount. Given that Donald Trump doesn't pay back loans, doesn't pay as he's supposed to, that he's got 91 pending felony charges against him, and that we now have this new report that just came out from the Monitor overseeing his finances, showing that there's a lot more nonsense and just made up stuff and that we even knew about in his New York civil fraud trial. What banker would loan him that kind of money? And what security would they demand? Because they know that if Trump ends up not being able to pay and the bondholder, the bond issuer is on the line, Trump will fight them every step of the way about collecting. And so it could be years with delays before that happens. On the other hand, if Donald really has what he claims, $400 million of cash, well, then he can put the money up, no trouble. He can put up the money for the bond and hypothecate to the person who puts up the bond $88 million from his supposed trove of cash. So if Donald doesn't appeal, we will know, hey, folks, remember when he told you he was worth more than $10 billion and then he became president and said, I don't want to sign my disclosure statements on my finances. Just let me file it without signing it under penalty of perjury. He was told, no, you got to sign it. And I estimated his net worth from that disclosure at $1 billion. Forbes said $3 billion and change. In either case, $1 billion, $3 billion, that's nowhere near 10. And even my billion in my mind was incredibly generous here. So we're going to see, the secret we're about to see revealed is, does Donald really have the $400 million of cash he claims?
Well, and you've really written and commented along the way that, again, this is an image that he's cultivated as opposed to something that's been backed up by actual holdings. And he does play fast and loose with the numbers that he's getting called, into court. And actually, there is a judgment being handed down in that fraud case over that. In the question about the fraud, because I'm seeing it in the chat, What do you expect to see there in terms of damages? When are we going to see? The question is, when are we going to see a judgment handed down in that case? It's pretty soon,
Judge
right?
Arthur, in the New York State fraud case, Judge Arthur Engoron, as early as tomorrow, may issue his opinion. Now, his duty is to assess how much ill-got money did Trump receive from his persistent frauds. And this new report by the Monitor he appointed, former Judge Barbara Jones, is damning as can be about his finances and his conduct. The Attorney General is asking for $350 million. $350 million plus 83 to E. Jean Carroll now puts him well over his $400 million, which means some kind of property somewhere probably have to be sold to satisfy these. Trump will no doubt appeal the state decision as well, but as with the E. Jean Carroll, there's almost no grounds to appeal. And his lawyers have mishandled these cases in terms of building a case for appeal. They'll try, and they'll get some months perhaps, but this is not going to go on for years and years as to the actual disgorgement of the money. And so, Donald is about to be stripped naked financially. And remember, to Donald Trump, Donald is his money. It is what defines him. And he just makes it up, and people, unbelievable how many people believe him when he says he's a billionaire. And,
Well, long before he was president, you were writing about him and this
35 years ago.
Yeah, this world that he created. I did then want to ask you about something that I believe you touch on in your piece, and that is, and we'll put a link to your piece in this because I think it's sort of instructive also, the legal part of it, which is that I think, as you note, you can claw back or from his property holdings, as you were just saying, you can get this judgment paid.
Oh, yeah, no, E. Jean Carroll is eventually going to be paid. Anybody who thinks Donald will slither out of this, no. He will be able to delay, and the only way she won't get paid is if there's not enough money to pay her the $83 million. She's not going to be first in line. I mean, the New York State, if it wants to, they're going to get in line ahead of her. And Trump, I expect that Judge Engoron's decision that will come as early as tomorrow in the New York civil fraud case will, again, take away his business licenses. In New York, we call them certificates, without which he can't do business. That's going to force the transfer of the ownership of those properties to somebody else. And they're not going to sell at carefully managed prices. They're going to go at fire sale prices. Donald, for instance, only owns his 3-story apartment at the top, the 56th, 7th, and 8th floors of Trump Tower. The office space he rents out, that's about almost 20 floors, and the retail space. And there's already a meme on the internet where it says Trump Tower, and it's been replaced with E. Jean Carroll Tower.
Right,
Same thing with his airplane, Trump replaced with E. Jean Carroll. But if properties have to be sold, they're just not going to bring the highest prices. That may mean there's not enough money to pay both the state of New York and E. Jean Carroll. And let's remember, there are all sorts of other lawsuits out there against Trump. Police officers from the attempted coup that Trump instigated. There are more than 24 women who've accused him of sexual assault or rape, and some of them have cases. There are other civil fraud cases against Trump, and the tide has turned on him. Instead of getting away with this stuff, he's now being backed into a corner.
So these civil cases and then the state judgment, et cetera, the idea somehow that he's been barred his business from doing work in the state of New York, for example, these are all things that have teeth and continue to have staying power, even if he is elected president, David K. Johnston?
Well, if he's elected president, it will help him stave off making the payments, but that's about all.
Why will it help him do that, David?
Well, because he will be able to say, I can't appear for this deposition on this date, sort of thing.
I see.
The courts have made it very clear since Bill Clinton that being president doesn't absolve you from being pursued in a civil case. Jennifer Flowers, who was one of Bill Clinton's innumerable mistresses had brought a case, and he had testified. I think it was her case, but it may have been one of the other women. Donald, for the moment, remember this has only been a few days now, has managed not to defame E. Jean Carroll again. He posted a bunch of things on Truth Social, but you'll see her name isn't there. But I don't believe Donald is capable of stopping making these comments. No amount of money, and that's what the punitive damages of $65 million are intended to do, to say, this is a price so high, we know you won't defame again. I don't think Donald's capable of never defaming her again. Somewhere down the road, whether it's tomorrow or 8 months from now, Donald will go back to defaming E. Jean Carroll because it's who he is. It's what he is. He's a 13-year-old boy who's had a Groundhog Day life. You know, he thinks about girls the way 13-year-old boys do, and you and I both know how that goes. And he believes he's not accountable to anyone, anywhere, for any reason.
Yeah. Walter agrees with you. He'll continue to defame E. Jean Carroll, so she'll have to sue him again. She is 80. You think she'll get her money in any kind
doesn't
of
matter. Her
timeline
estate will get money.
I know the estate will get it, but
either one of them dies, it doesn't matter. Donald Trump's estate will pay, or Jean Carroll's estate will collect.
Maybe Kushner can loan Trump money, says Vilma.
Well, the $2 billion Kushner is investing isn't his money; it's the Saudis' money. And remember, that's a country where not long ago they beheaded 36 men for the crime of praying in public for a better government.
Yeah, that is it's a tough crew.
Saudi Arabia pays cash.
Fees off of that, 2% a year plus management other fees for performance. But and also, you know, Ivanka Trump got herself out of this case, the New York civil case.
Yeah.
And I don't think she's going to do anything that might drag her back into this. That would be foolhardy. In fact, don't be shocked if Ivanka throws her daddy under the bus.
Wow. And then I want to move on to kind of an odd endorsement that Donald Trump got. But before I get to that, just as long as we're talking about money, there is this instance of this bombshell, and it's in the business fraud case, in New York. And it's about a loan that Trump claimed he got. It's a $50 million loan. Yeah. No, you got David's holding it up.
Yep.
Yeah, there's the document. So he's paying on this loan. The only thing is the loan came from himself. So he's essentially paying himself for this $50 million loan. And then it comes out that he doesn't even have the loan, that it's a completely made up line item anyway.
Yeah, this is what's called a springing loan. And the purpose of it is to avoid having to pay tax on something until that loan springs to life. It turns out that former Judge Barbara Jones, who's the court-appointed monitor in the case that Judge Engoron is hearing, the one brought by New York State Attorney General Letitia James, she has had experts going through Donald's finances, and she's finding all sorts of stuff where they've not been straightforward about this, and they don't have. And it turns out in the case of this loan, they don't have documentation. Well, it's one of the principles in the law is you can't just say you did something, you actually have to do it. There's a case I wrote about years ago with the use of a tax avoidance vehicle by New York companies using a Delaware entity to escape New York taxes. And two companies came up for trial at the same time after audits. And one of them, a paint company, they had done everything they're supposed to do. They had dotted the I's, crossed the T's, followed practice, paid interest rates, all the technical rules. The other ones, they just said, well, we did this. And the courts held that the guys who jumped through all the hoops, they got the tax benefits, and the other guys not only didn't get them, they had to pay big penalties and interest. And so if Donald's thing here, even if you ignore that it's fraud, he's lost the tax benefits for it. Now the question is, will he be audited and pursued? Donald may get away with not paying some federal taxes because the IRS is so underfunded and they may not want to raise this as an issue. But you can be absolutely sure that the state of New York will vigilantly go through his tax returns. And New York state tax returns, except for retirement income, Social Security and pensions, 401ks, are identical to federal returns. So they will scrutinize him. And if he's cheated, if he's done something I've written a lot about for the last 25 years called 1231 cheating, which is rampant because the IRS doesn't look for it, even though it's easy to look for it. If he's done what's called 1231 cheating, then they'll catch him and they can prosecute him for it.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about it openly. So, yeah. Yeah.
None of this, Mark, should surprise people. I wrote a piece for the Sunday New York Daily News some months ago, how to prosecute Donald Trump. And it was addressed to Alvin Bragg, who didn't take my advice. But I pointed out that the Donald Trump tax returns, that information that got out, he created 65 fictitious businesses and took tax deductions. Some of them, they had no revenue. He just took tax deductions. Well, the reason he's going to be prosecuted for that was that he did the same thing in 1984. He was tried twice, civilly, not criminally, but tried for tax fraud by the city of New York and the state of New York. He lost both cases. His own lawyer testified under oath that Donald is a forger, that he'd forged the documents, the tax return document. And so being on notice from these very strongly written opinions, you can't create a fictitious company and take deductions for expenses you didn't incur and can't prove. He's very easy to prosecute for this. If there's a slam dunk case, doing it 65 more times,
yeah,
I don't know what would be easier to a jury.
His world of invented deductions and loans, it's now becoming, as you suggested, laid bare through these court investigations. Now to the politics, and then I'll let you go. But the politics of his reelection or his election get more complicated and weird. Rapper Snoop Dogg, who had been in a fight with Donald Trump, they had apparently this back and forth. Now there's been a rapprochement. They are cool with each other. Donald Trump, he ain't done nothing wrong to me, said Snoop. Yeah. He has done only great things for me. He pardoned Michael Harris. Now, Michael Harris is the co-founder of Death Row Records,
right,
and was given a clemency, right, by Donald Trump.
Yep. Well, when this is all over, and it will be all over, there are going to be two sets of people involved in public life in America. Those who demonstrated principle and resolve, and those who, when it was convenient, kissed Donald Trump's ring. And Snoop Dogg just put himself in that group. I mean, the man's a tremendously talented artist, but what he's doing here and what a whole lot of other politicians are doing are very troubling. Mitch McConnell, at least in the last few days, has leaked that Donald Trump is trying to make things at the border as bad as possible rather than getting a bipartisan bill passed. And that tells you that he's had enough of Donald Trump. He's just not willing to take the lead up front, and he wasn't willing to free Republican senators to convict Donald Trump on a second impeachment, which, we wouldn't have all these troubles today had Mitch McConnell. So there's some people in the middle, but Snoop Dogg's a good example of where, expediency wins out over principles.
Right, exactly. I mean, here's a guy who was convicted of attempted murder of a corrections officer. That's what that guy was, the co-founder of Death Row Records, is serving time for. And he got clemency, and it's sort of like, I don't care about everything else. He helped me out on this one issue. So, the politics of me takes precedence over the anything else. David, I refer everyone to dcreport.org. In fact, I will link to it in the description on this show. That really talks about the E. Jean Carroll case, but more than that, it speaks to the Trump fortune and how it may be a small F on fortune and a big F on another word for Donald Trump. So, hey,
Mark, if I can drop one last thing before we go.
Of course, please.
In the Santa Cruz Sentinel, my hometown newspaper, there's an article today. I reposted the picture in my Twitter, David Cayj, my thread, same name, and my Facebook page, so anybody can access them. In the Capitola, next to Santa Cruz, they had a fatal accident at a busy intersection. So they've put up a new stop sign, and the stop sign has flashing lights. Turns out they've done this in San Diego. Interesting idea. I hope people take a look at it. Maybe it's not going to work, and maybe it's a cheap and inexpensive. There we go on the screen. A cheap and inexpensive way to do it. But I think it would be smart if people take a look at this and think about: do we have to put up a 4-way traffic light setup, which costs these days well north of $250,000, or can some thoughtful but inexpensive things like this be effective in saving lives and preventing injuries?
That's great. That's terrific. Well, there you see it at David's Twitter feed. And so you're right. I mean,
Thank
again,
you.
maybe more common sense. Yeah, thanks, Tony, for that. Appreciate you putting it up.
Thank you, Tony.
David, thank you for joining us again. We'll talk to you next Tuesday. Appreciate it. David K. Johnston, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.